so many of these symptoms. So by exploring their biochemistry, you discover, wow, this patient's magnesium deficient. Let's give them some magnesium in a special form to help them.
But let's be clear that our viewers who may express those symptoms shouldn't just go right out to the health food store and buy magnesium now.
Absolutely not, no.
You really have to know what you're doing, because there could be other things involved as well.
Correct.
It seems like people have that approach these days. They're reading a lot in the popular press, they're going online and they're getting information about potential for nutritional deficiencies. A big topic today is inflammation, how it relates to asthma and allergies, hypersensitivity reactions, immune deficiency reactions. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Well, you know, inflammation is probably the common denominator. It's the common cause of so many problems, whether it is autoimmune diseases or immune problems or accelerated aging or pain or allergies. Inflammation underlies all of these things. And
excuse me, Dr. Rothman, when we talk about inflammation, we're not talking about where somebody bangs themselves and they have swelling, that type of inflammation. Could you be a little more explicit in explaining what we mean by inflammation inside the body and how it represents other processes going on that need to be paid attention to?
Okay, that's a good point. You know, inflammation is not a bad thing necessarily. It's bad if it's out of balance. We have an immune system which is supposed to protect us from foreign invaders. And when our body senses a foreign invader, something that's not good for us, we try to basically bleach it, like you would bleach your clothing.
Like a virus or a bacteria.
Correct.
Or something like that, okay?
Yeah. And so we put basically bleach out into our system. So we oxidize these things. And the terms that you've probably heard are free radicals. And a lot of people are throwing that term around. So basically we create free radicals to burn up these invaders, and that burning sensation really is what you feel in terms of inflammation. So we have this inflammation to try to counteract these foreign invaders, and then we have these fire extinguishers to counteract the fire. Those are your antioxidants.
Okay, and in lay terms, how could you explain that a little bit better? You know, a lot of people are expressing allergies throughout the course of the year, whether it's spring, summer, or fall, or even winter. And if they have an allergy, we know that they're expressing some form of inflammation inside their body. What's going on, and what do you advise to be the best approach towards that?
Well, there may be specific foods that they're allergic to, or specific environmental things like pollen or dust, but it's really how they're responding to those things which is even more important. And their immune system may be hyperactive. In other words, it's just over-responsive. Just any little thing is going to set off that immune system. And the cause of that may be because they're eating things that are not good for them all the time, and their body's recognizing those things as poisonous. So the single most important thing is don't eat things that are poisonous, that actually cause inflammation. And unfortunately, we as a people are eating these things, consuming them just all over the place. One example of that would be sugar. Now, we've all heard sugar's no good for you, but when you really get into the science of it, it would shock you how bad sugar is. And it's one of those things that will make inflammation, allergies, any problem that you have much, much worse.
Now, who says that sugar is bad? If it's so bad for you, how come it tastes so good?
Well, it tastes good because I believe we're all addicted to sugar, and that we're born addicted to sugar.
What do you mean by that? How can we be born addicted to sugar? How did cavemen have sugar?
Well, they didn't really have regular sugar, but they had perhaps some fruits available. You know, if you look at what caused more deaths than anything in the history of the human race, and that's starvation. And unless you had some extra fat on you before the winter came, you would actually starve to death in the winter. So we're attracted to sugar because it actually makes us fat, which used to be an advantage. And that's why I believe that we are all addicted to it. So if you look at when is fruit mostly available to us, well, it's available at the end of the summer before the winter comes. And so if you weren't attracted to this taste, we start gorging ourselves on this fruit, and it would actually create fat in our bodies, which at that point was an advantage.
So if I understand you correctly, what happens is we eat things that aren't necessarily good for us, or we eat things that aren't necessarily in the right quantity that's good for us. Your body recognizes it as being toxic and poisonous. Even though it tastes good, you put it inside of you. Your body reacts to it, by creating a very sensitive immune system that's responding to it, and then that immune system, in responding to the toxins that are inside your body, also go after other things that may be in your environment, like pollen and things like that. And that's why a person becomes so inflamed. Is that pretty much?
I think you got that pretty well said. I'm sure there are people out there in the medical community that would argue with the specifics of that, and I would say, but you really put that together in a nutshell. Very good job, yeah. Okay,
so now, if a person's walking around, do they know they have inflammation inside their body? Is it something that they can be aware of or feel, or could it be that they have a reduced immunity as a result of these processes going on because they're thinking that they're eating the right things, but they may not be, and it's causing them to be more susceptible to allergies, diseases, and other processes?
Exactly, and there's people walking around, they're the walking wounded that are sort of dragging themselves through the day. They may experience fatigue or headaches or sweatiness or hunger or lack of concentration, or just name the symptom. Those symptoms are all being caused by something. Inflammation often is one of those things that's causing that, and sugar and other things. By the way, fried food is the other major culprit.
Oh, really?
Oh, fried food and polyunsaturated vegetable oils, these things like the corn oils, are terrible, terrible products that are only being used because they're very inexpensive.
So corn oils, what other kinds of oils are the kinds of oils to avoid cooking with? Well, corn oil, what else? Canola oil, is that good? We hear that has health benefits. Sesame oil, there's all kinds of oils that are out there. Are there certain ones that are better than others?
There are certain ones that are less bad than others. The ones that I would only recommend 3 oils to patients, basically. And anything else other than that can really lead to inflammation and accelerated aging and other problems. Butter, olive oil, and coconut oil.
Wait a minute. Back up a second. You said butter, not margarine. We're told to avoid butter and cook with margarine. And you're saying cook with butter.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that?
Well, first of all, butter is stable because it's what's called a saturated fat. It's a very, very sturdy product. If you use margarine, margarine is actually very unstable and will fry very easily. So when you cook with it and it fries, it actually oxidizes, means it gets burnt up. So you're putting this burnt up material in your body, and you're basically putting inflammation or things that are prone to inflammation into your body. It's the last thing you want to do. Butter got a bad rap because there was an experiment done in 1913 in St. Petersburg, Russia, where they gave butter to rabbits, and the rabbits developed heart disease. And this was how the model of heart disease was actually created. But the problem is, Ken, that rabbits are vegetarians. They were never meant to eat butter.
I haven't seen too many rabbits butter a carrot.
No. So this myth that butter is actually bad for us started with these rabbit studies in 1913. And there's been other things that have perpetuated this myth as well. There was a very, very famous study called the 7-Country Study by Dr. Ancel Keys, where he allegedly proved that any country that had high levels of saturated fat intake actually had high levels of heart disease. Well, the problem is that there was more than 7 countries in the world. Ancel Keys only chose those 7 that actually fit his results.
And we know about, for example, in France, where the diet is relatively high in fat, and yet people don't have as much heart disease as they do in other countries.
Well, and you're right about that. In fact, France, apparently, among Western civilizations, has the highest saturated fat intake of any country. Yet, they have one of the lowest levels of heart disease. Now, in this country, we call it the French paradox. Nobody knows why this is happening. Oh, it must be because they eat grapes and they drink wine. No, it's because they're eating the saturated fat. It's actually very good for people.
Okay, so when Thanksgiving comes, pass the butter, I guess, right?
Right. And by the way, there are certain patients that I do tell them don't eat butter and don't eat high levels of cholesterol. And everybody's a little different, where it's not all black and white like that.
Right. With anything, any food, anything that you eat has the potential to be a toxin or a food, depending upon your own chemistry and what's going on inside of your body.
Correct. You can have too much or too little of anything. although I would say olive oil is actually, because it's a neutral oil, it's what's called a monounsaturated fat. That's actually safe for everybody. But when it comes to butter, there are some patients, I tell them eat tons of butter. I personally need lots of butter for my